Today at 6, a severe blow for Boris Johnson as the Conservatives lose 2 by-elections in the north and south of England. Lib Dem joy. They overturn a massive Tory majority to take the Devon seat of Tiverton and Honiton.
The people of Tiverton and Honiton have spoken for the British people, and they've sent a loud and clear message. It's time to show Boris the door.
In Wakefield in West Yorkshire, it was Labour's turn to celebrate. They regained the seat they lost to the Tories at the general election.
Now we've had the sort of swing that puts us on track, not just for a Labour government, but for a majority Labour government. So this is hugely significant for the Labour Party.
Thousands of miles away, the Prime Minister at a Commonwealth meeting in Rwanda sought to brush off the defeats.
Yes, it's absolutely true that we've had some tough by-election results, and they've been, I think, a reflection of a lot of things, but we've got to recognise that voters are going through a tough time at the moment.
But the Tory party chairman, Oliver Dowden, has resigned from the cabinet, saying we cannot carry on with business as usual. We'll bring you all the latest. And our other major story this evening.
We did it!
In the US, a landmark decision that's led to triumph and despair as America's Supreme Court votes to overturn a woman's constitutional right to abortion.
It's so vindicating to know that we can now take tangible steps to lessen the violence of abortion in our country.
It doesn't matter what they say. Again, abortions will continue, they just won't be legal, and women will die from botched abortions.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, wickets tumble for England as they fail to make early headway in the New Zealand first innings as they chase a series whitewash at Headingley.
Good evening. Boris Johnson has suffered a series of major political blows, with the Conservatives losing 2 by-elections in the north and south of England and the party's chairman resigning from the cabinet. It's the first time that a governing party has lost 2 by-elections on the same day for over 30 years. Tiverton and Honiton in Devon, a former Tory stronghold, saw the Lib Dems overturning a massive 24,000 majority to take the seat. And Labour regained Wakefield in West Yorkshire, a seat it had lost to the Conservatives in 2019. Following the defeats, the Tory party chairman Oliver Dowden has resigned, saying in a letter to Boris Johnson that we cannot carry on with business as usual. And the former party leader, Michael Howard, has said that Mr Johnson should step down. But the Prime Minister on a trip to Rwanda was defiant, saying that there was more for his government to do. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young.
Rejected by the voters, Conservatives say they were braced for defeat. But after the Lib Dems' record-breaking victory here in Tiverton, the Tory candidate couldn't get out quick enough.
Alan, do you not want to say thank you to everyone?
In Wakefield, it was Labour celebrating. At the last election, they lost dozens of seats like this that they'd held for decades. Is this a sign they can win them back?
Tonight, the people of Wakefield have spoken on behalf of the British people. They have said unreservedly, Boris Johnson, your contempt for this country is no longer tolerated.
As dawn broke, the Conservative Party chairman decided to quit. Oliver Dowden's letter to his leader was polite but pointed. Our supporters are distressed and disappointed by recent events, and I share their feelings. We cannot carry on with business as usual. Somebody must take responsibility. And for the first time, former Conservative leader Michael Howard is calling on Boris Johnson to do just that.
I think the country needs new leadership, and I think the time has now come to provide it. His biggest asset has always been his ability to win votes, but I'm afraid yesterday's results make it clear that he no longer has that ability.
The Prime Minister, though, is more than 6,000 miles away in Rwanda at a Commonwealth get-together and says it would be crazy for him to resign.
when people are finding it tough, they send messages to politicians, and politicians have got to respond.
But would he take personal responsibility for the results?
People will continue to beat me up and say this or that about, and to attack me. That's fine. That's quite right. That is the job of politicians. In the end, voters, journalists, they have no one else to make their complaints to. I have to take that, but I also have to get on with the job of delivering for the people of this country.
The Conservatives have now been in power here for 12 years. There's been a pandemic. There's a cost of living crisis. Not the kind of political backdrop where you'd expect a government to be doing well in by-elections. But dozens of Conservative MPs think that Boris Johnson's leadership is making things worse, that voters are finding any way they can to punish the party. Labour's path back to power is steep, but Sir Keir Starmer insists the result in Wakefield is more than a protest vote.
This is hugely significant for the Labour Party, and I'm so proud that we can present that confident Labour Party utterly focused on the voters. That's what I wanted to achieve, and this is evidence that we're on course for a Labour government.
The Liberal Democrats are on the march in southern England.
OK, is that close enough?
And their leader says that's partly down to Mr Johnson's unpopularity.
Under Boris Johnson's leadership, things keep getting worse. So let me tell the Prime Minister what the British people expect. They expect to be led, and to be led with decency.
This was a decent win for Labour and a spectacular one for the Lib Dems. It's that combination which could be fatal to the Conservatives' chances of staying in power. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's take a closer look now at the two by-election results and the change since the general election. So, in 2019, the Conservatives gained Wakefield from Labour by just under 3,500 votes. Labour had held this seat since the 1930s, and they've won it back with a majority of just under 5,000. But those numbers pale by comparison with what happened in Tiverton and Honiton, which the Tories won in 2019 with a massive majority of over 24,000. And now the Liberal Democrats have overturned that to take the seat, and it's a seat they've never held before, and they've got a majority of just over 6,000. Now, take a look at how the share of the vote in Wakefield has changed. The Tories in 2019 were over 7 points ahead of Labour. Now Labour is over 17 points ahead of the Tories. And take a look too at the drop in the Liberal Democrat vote last night, going from 3.9% points to 1.8 percentage points last night. It does suggest an element of tactical voting by Lib Dem supporters. And in Tiverton, the figures are even more stark. The Tories were way ahead of both rival parties back in 2019. Now the Liberal Democrats have leapfrogged Labour and increased their vote share by a massive 39 points. And look again at the drop in Labour's performance last night compared to 3 years ago. Here it's their supporters who appear to have voted tactically. Well, let's take a look at the swing now, which in Wakefield was 12.7% from Tory to Labour, and in Tiverton, from Tory to the Lib Dems, it was a whopping 29.9%. Now, what would all of this mean if the result in Wakefield were replicated in a general election, assuming no change in the other party's support? Well, it would result in Labour being 1 seat short of an overall majority. And if we took Tiverton as a guide, then the Lib Dems would do vastly better. So what do these two results mean for the Tory party and for Boris Johnson's future? Our political correspondent Nick Eardley has this analysis.
It's time to show Boris the door.
Celebrating a record-breaking win. The result in Tiverton and Honiton was the biggest majority overturned at a by-election ever. But 3 times in just over a year, Ed Davey's party have overcome massive Tory majorities in what were Conservative heartlands. There was Chesham and Amersham, which had always been Conservative blue. Then North Shropshire and another not-so-subtle photo op when the Lib Dems overcame a Conservative majority of 23,000. Boris Johnson used to be seen as a political winner, the sort of leader who could bring in crowds and votes. But he only came here to Tiverton and Honiton once during the campaign. And some are wondering whether the rows over parties and policy mean that he's now more of an electoral liability. And the question that Conservative MPs have to weigh up is if he's still the best man to lead them into the next general election. On the High Street, Peter explained why he'd stopped voting Conservative.
I think they've lost some of the moral ground, so I did vote Lib Dem this time. I think it's a moderate sort of policies, and I've been disaffected with Boris a bit.
Others weighed up their electoral dilemmas.
I'm not happy with Boris Johnson, but I voted for the Conservative Party. I don't think he's an honest man. I don't trust him. But, you know, it goes right across the board. You know, no one sticks out to me at the moment who is trustworthy.
Do you like Boris Johnson?
I don't dislike him, but I think there's been a few mistakes made down the line.
So you might go back to Conservatives?
I might. Yes, I might. It depends what happens. If we get a new Prime Minister and a new cabinet, I just feel very loyal to the Conservatives, and I was disloyal this time.
It was all quiet at the Conservative Club in Honiton today. For Tories here and elsewhere in the country, there's a lot to weigh up. Nick Earley, BBC News.
Well, our political correspondent Alex Forsyth is in Rwanda with the Prime Minister. Alex, you've been with him all day. What's his mood like?
Well, Rita, from first thing this morning, the number 10 team here in Kigali seemed determined that these by-election defeats wouldn't knock them off course. We were told the Prime Minister was up early, he went for a swim, he'd heard the news, and that was before he was told about Oliver Dowden's resignation. But even at that point, the Downing Street team seemed undeterred. And what's striking is that was the tone the Prime Minister took in that press conference. He acknowledged this was a difficult set of results. He said the government had to listen, but he didn't seem to take any personal responsibility or even really acknowledge that his leadership might have played a part. He talked about a plan that his government had, particularly when it came to the economy, saying that people hurt governments when they were going through tough times themselves. But he said he didn't think politics, personality should play a part in British politics. I think the issue, Rita, is that for some of his own MPs, Boris Johnson's personality is part of the problem, his very style of government. As one minister said, this has to be a reset moment. He has to change direction. So far, there is no sign of that. Boris Johnson is staying here in Kigali, carrying on meeting with Commonwealth leaders before he heads off to meeting G7 and NATO leaders later this week. Only then he'll be back in the UK. He might want to show his strength on the global stage, but the reality is Boris Johnson cannot escape the pressure he is facing back home.
Alex, thank you very much. Alex Forsyth reporting there. Well, there are more updates, news and analysis on BBC News Online. That's at bbc.co.uk/news and also by using the BBC News app. The time is 13 minutes past 6. Our top story this evening. A severe blow for Boris Johnson as the Conservatives lose 2 by-elections. The Lib Dems overturn a 24,000 Tory majority in Tiverton and Honiton. And coming up, Glastonbury Festival kicks off at Worthy Farm with hundreds of thousands of revellers ready to enjoy a weekend of music.
Coming up in sport on the BBC News channel, Wimbledon is just round the corner and Emma Raducanu learns her first round opponent after the draw was made. Will she be happy? More on that and the other matches to look forward to.
Millions of women across the United States have lost their constitutional right to abortion after a ruling of momentous significance by the country's Supreme Court. It has overturned a 50-year law that legalized abortion nationwide, and it now means that individual US states are legally able to ban it. Up to half of America's 50 states are expected to do so, and 13 have already passed so-called trigger laws, which automatically outlaw abortion with the court's ruling. In the past hour, President Biden has said it was a sad day for the court and for the country. Our North America editor Sarah Smith reports now on an issue and a decision which has polarised the United States.
This is a huge, historic moment for America. As they hear the news from the court, there's jubilation from anti-abortionists.
Life won today! Life won today!
Life won today, they chant, celebrating a victory after almost 50 years.
I've seen the devastation abortion has wrought on our country on a communal level and on a personal level. And it's so vindicating to know that we can now take tangible steps to lessen the violence of abortion in our country.
10 years ago, did you ever imagine this would happen? I imagined it a lot, but people told me it was impossible, that we would never see this kind of victory. And now I know that victory is not only possible, it's happened. So we are going to work off of this momentum. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to build a better world.
Fury from those campaigning to keep the guaranteed right to abortion, promising to fight back.
It's not the will of the people, and this country is supposed to run off of the will of the people. I'm 21 and I'm terrified.
We have a lot of work to do to make that happen, but we will never give up.
It's 50 years since there was last a significant decision on abortion rights in America. It might be another 50.
More, sure. But we're not going to stop. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they say. Again, abortions will continue. They just won't be legal, and women will die from botched abortions.
It's obvious this ruling is not going to end the arguments over abortion in America. In fact, it will inflame them. In this deeply polarized society, abortion is already one of the most divisive issues.
Today's ruling means individual states can make their own laws on abortion. There are 13 states that have so-called trigger laws in place, which will now lead to an immediate abortion ban. Another 13 will move quickly to ban or severely limit access, says the Guttmacher Institute, a pro-choice group. It estimates 36 million women of reproductive age will live in states without abortion access.
The hypocrisy is raging, but the harm is endless. What this means to women is such an insult. It's a slap in the face to women about using their own judgment to make their own decisions about their reproductive freedom.
The political impact could be felt in elections in November. Pro-choice Democrats hope women will turn out for them in large numbers.
Jesus loves the little children.
Anti-abortion activists view today's victory as merely a first step. They will now take their campaigns to every state which continues to allow terminations, trying to get abortion banned in the whole of the United States. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
Well, as we saw there in Sarah's report, there are 13 US states which have laws in place to impose an immediate ban on abortion now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned by the Supreme Court. One of them is Arkansas. Sophie Long reports now from an abortion clinic in the state capital, Little Rock. And just a warning, her report contains some distressing detail.
It was exactly the ruling they'd been dreading. When the decision was delivered, it extinguished their final flickers of hope. Outside, they had to turn women away.
Abortion is murder. It's just been upheld.
Inside, they had to deal with the realization that the care they provided here is now a criminal offense.
I don't think there's a waiting period there, but it is about a 5.5-hour drive.
And tell people they can no longer help.
And see, it's like having to turn women away, like, that sucks.
Jennifer Thompson first came here as a patient. She says her abortion saved her life, and the care she received here inspired her to train so she could do the same for others.
And I have to tell them, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do for you. I'm sorry that your boyfriend beats you every day and that he rapes you all the time. There's nothing I can do. You're going to have to find somewhere else to go. I mean, I can give them information to help them try, but it's heartbreaking, man. Like, you know, this place saved my life, literally. And to not be able to provide anybody else with that when I know what this place is capable of, it's heartbreaking, man.
For more than 10 years, Dr. Willie Parker has travelled here from another state because the restrictive laws and the threat of violence or financial ruin has long been too great for local doctors to carry out abortions here themselves.
I feel angry in the way that anybody who is deeply vested in human rights should feel angry and outraged and indignant anytime they are witnessing injustice. We will come to recognize the full cost of criminalizing abortion when we start to see the bump in the rise in maternal mortality and morbidity, suffering and death related to conditions that are unique to pregnancy.
For the anti-abortion protesters outside, this is a good day.
It will be a day of celebration for me, though we will not fully celebrate until abortion is eradicated fully from our land, until Little Rock Family Planning Services, for example, is closed down and does not reopen. Then we can celebrate for sure.
Bye, thank you. They will continue their fight, but the Supreme Court's ruling will fundamentally change the course of the lives of all the women who pass the protesters every day to provide the care they did here. Sophie Long, BBC News, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Let's go back to Sarah Smith in Washington. Sarah, President Biden, we've heard, condemning this decision in the strongest possible terms, and yet the Supreme Court's ruling will go ahead. How can that be?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? As you heard President Biden saying he thinks this is a tragic mistake, and yet he can't do anything about it because the Supreme Court rules on this. So even though the Democrats have the White House, the Senate and the House of Representatives, they don't have enough numbers to pass a federal law guaranteeing the right to abortion. They tried that a few weeks ago and they failed. So there is nothing they can do once the Supreme Court has ruled. They have taken away the constitutional guarantee of abortion rights, and that means individual states will set their own rules and are already doing so. Almost immediately, Missouri said that they had instituted an abortion ban. Arkansas will do so later on this afternoon, and you'll hear many more following that. So what the president can do, and he says he will continue to work to do, is to try to help women from any of these states that have banned terminations travelling to other states which continue to allow the procedure. He says they want to make sure that women can do that and also be able to receive abortion pills through the mail. But beyond that, there's nothing even the president can do once the Supreme Court has made its decision.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah Smith reporting from Washington. Now here, there's been another significant increase in COVID infections, up about 300,000 in the last week. Our health editor Hugh Pim is here to examine the numbers. Hugh.
Yes, Rita, a sharp rise in COVID infections according to the latest ONS household survey. This suggests 1.7 million people in the UK had the virus last week. That was up 23% on the week before. And there were varying case rates in the UK's nations. Scotland had the highest. 1 in 20 had the virus there. In England, it was 1 in 40. In Wales, 1 in 45. And in Northern Ireland, 1 in 30. Health officials have said today that more than half of COVID cases are driven by newer strains of the Omicron variant, known as BA4 and BA5, which spread more quickly. They've stressed again the importance of getting vaccinated.
We've very little evidence that it causes more severe disease. However, we are concerned that there are a number of people, particularly in the higher risk groups, the over 75s or those that are immunosuppressed, who haven't come forward for their 4th dose in the spring booster. And those people, we think, could get the consequences of severe COVID. So we're urging people, if they've been offered their 4th dose, to come forward.
4th jabs are set to be available to 65-year-olds and older from the autumn, though it's not clear for those who are younger. So far, hospital numbers remain relatively low, thanks to vaccines and Omicron being milder than previous variants. This chart shows the number of daily COVID hospital admissions in the UK, the dark line representing the underlying trend, around 2,500 in late March, just under 1,000 now, but rising. Some, though, are patients with other conditions who've tested positive. Health officials think those numbers could go up from here and say they'll watch the data very closely. Rita.
Thank you, Hugh. A second earthquake has shaken an area of southeastern Afghanistan, causing yet more death and destruction. More than 1,000 people are known to have died in the quakes, which took place in Paktita province, which is one of the poorest areas in one of the poorest countries in the world. Our correspondent Sikandar Kamani reports now from Guyane.
Scrambling for scraps of bread. For survivors of this earthquake, support is flowing in, but more is needed. We're in Guyane district, close to the epicentre. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed, families wiped out. There are still injuries to treat. This charity normally removes landmines, but now they've set up a mobile clinic. 5-year-old Barakatullah had his arm trapped by rubble. There are lots of wounded children, Nakibullah tells us. We've had to fly 12 patients to Kabul by helicopter because they needed specialist care. Nearby, we meet Zarma Gul, his home reduced to rubble. When the earthquake struck, he faced a terrible dilemma: who to save first? When the ceiling fell down, my wife cried out for help. But my daughter was in the room with us, and I took her out first. Then I went to my other children. By the time Zarma Gul returned to his wife, she had died. The winding dirt roads leading to the remote, worst affected villages are now busy with trucks carrying supplies. Aid is arriving. The UN are here, as are international charities and domestic ones. But this is a country that was already struggling with a dire economic and humanitarian crisis. The Red Crescent is distributing packs with essentials, blankets and cooking oil. We need everything, this man says, because everything we owned has been buried in the dirt. Across the road, one large extended family are setting up tents, their homes destroyed. 7 of their relatives were killed, including 4 young children. There's no meaning to my life anymore, Remet Gul tells us. I saw my 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren die. My heart is broken. We need help, he says. We have nothing. Whatever we owned has been destroyed. Back by the main bazaar, now an aid depot, the crowd waiting for donations has grown. A weary population struggling with a new crisis. Sikandar Kamani, BBC News, Paktika Province.
The former glamour model and reality TV star Katie Price has been given an 18-month community order at Lewis Crown Court and ordered to carry out 170 hours of unpaid work. But she's avoided a jail sentence after breaching a restraining order by sending abusive messages to her ex-husband about his fiancée. Glastonbury Festival's main stage opened today after 3 years of COVID cancellations. Our culture editor Katie Razzle has been down at Worthy Farm, where she spoke to Wolf Alice, who won Best Band at this year's Brits.
After the longest absence since the festival really got going, the stage is finally set. This afternoon, Brit winners Wolf Alice took to the Pyramid stage. They nearly didn't make it after their original flight from America, where they were touring, was cancelled.
And it kind of feels even more, well, it feels bizarre, but it feels very special to be here now.
Let's have some fun!
What is it about Glastonbury that means you just didn't want to miss it?
For everything about it, I think. I mean, especially playing on the Pyramid stage, it's like a dream come true.
It's a dream for 200,000 people in this city that springs up in the Somerset countryside. But for 3 long years, the cows have had this place to themselves.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now all sorts have been marching into Worthy Farm.
I'm just excited to be free for 5 days from anything else in the world.
You could go here, your mum could go here, do you know what I mean? It's great.
It's great to be back in a place where everyone's having a good time, especially with the last 3 years have just been an absolute myth.
Wolf Alice performed alone in the festival's famous Stone Circle last year after COVID put pay to Glastonbury for a 2nd year in a row.
Last year was beautiful, to be honest. It was a real, unique experience.
I think every gig we've played since, well, post-COVID, not that it's gone anywhere, but since we've been allowed to play live, it's been like fever pitch.
Billie Eilish headlines tonight, Sir Paul McCartney tomorrow. These festival goers are back in the place they love, and the weekend is only just beginning. Katie Razzle, BBC News, Glastonbury.
Let's take a look at the weather now. Here's Thomas. Thomas.
Rita, thank you. And a good evening to you. We've got a fine weekend on the way, but a bit of a mixed bag for some of us, with sunshine and showers on the way. At the moment, heavy showers affecting parts of northeastern England and also the southwest, and they are heading towards Glastonbury. Now, this low pressure is going to park itself around Ireland over the next 2 or 3 days. Strong winds blowing around it, so western coasts of the UK will feel the breeze. Let's have a look at the forecast then through the course of this evening. So we've got showers moving in from the south, crossing the country. The low pressure just to the west of Ireland here. By the early hours of Saturday morning, temperatures hovering around about 14 degrees in London, 14 also in the lowlands of Scotland. So through the course of tomorrow, most of the showers will be swept in by that strong breeze blowing around this area of low pressure towards western parts of the UK. Let's take a closer look then. So if you squint, you can just about see these showers there affecting parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Irish Sea coast, through Wales and southwestern England. Fewer showers expected in the east of the country, and that's where we're going to see also the most amount of sunshine, the lighter winds and higher temperatures up to around 22 degrees in Norwich, Hull, and not far off that in Newcastle as well. So the low pressure is still with us on Sunday, the strong winds blowing around it, and in fact it's going to turn quite windy inland as well during the course of Sunday. Gusts of around 30 to 40 miles an hour whipping above the trees a little bit. 23 in Norwich, but only 15 in Belfast. And in the outlook, you can see quite a mixed picture to come for Edinburgh, Belfast and Cardiff. The best of the sunshine, always the further south and east you are.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And that is the BBC News at 6 today. You can, of course, keep up with all the latest developments on the BBC News website. From the 16, it is goodbye, but the news does continue on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Bye-bye.